All right, let's get right into one of the most incredible stories in all of history, the fall of the Aztec Empire. I mean, think about it, a massive, powerful civilization with this breathtaking capital city, and it all just crumbles in 2 years. So how on earth did that happen? That's what we're here to unpack.
And to really get a sense of what we're talking about, you have to start with this. This quote, I mean, wow. It's from a Spanish conquistador, and it just paints this horrifying picture of the final days in the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan. This wasn't just a battle, this was total annihilation. So, that leads us right to the big question, the one that hangs over this entire story. I mean, how does an empire of 6 million people, with a capital city bigger than anything in Europe at the time, fall to just a handful of invaders? The math just doesn't work. Was it guns and steel? Was it some kind of brilliant military plan? Or was there something else going on? The answer, as you'll see, is a perfect storm of politics, plague, and, yeah, even psychology. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around how this empire fell, we've got to go back to the very beginning, back to 1519. This is the moment when two completely separate worlds, which had, grown up for thousands of years without ever knowing the other existed, just slam into each other. It's an unbelievable moment in human history.
Just look at the matchup here. On one side, you've got Hernan Cortez with what, about 500 soldiers? And then on the other, Moctezuma II, ruling over an empire of 6 million people. And his capital city, Tenochtitlan, had over 200,000 residents. That's bigger than London or Paris at the time. Honestly, on paper, this shouldn't have been a fight. This story should have been over before it even started.
And we're not talking about just any city. Tenochtitlan was a masterpiece. I mean, this was a city built on an island in the middle of a lake. It had these massive causeways connecting it to the mainland, aqueducts bringing in fresh water, and these incredible floating gardens called chinampas. This was the vibrant, beating heart of a really advanced civilization. But here's the catch, and this is absolutely crucial to the story. The Aztec Empire, well, it wasn't exactly one big happy family. It was built by conquering their neighbors. And they demanded a lot: heavy taxes or tribute, and a constant supply of people for their human sacrifice rituals. They even fought these so-called flower wars just to capture more victims. So, as you can imagine, there was a ton of bad blood. The whole region was basically a powder keg, just waiting for a spark. And that spark turned out to be Hernan Cortez.
But before we get to the fall, we have to talk about the moment the whole invasion almost ended for the Spanish. They were nearly annihilated. And this event really shows you that the Aztecs were no pushovers. They were a fierce, powerful military force, and they delivered a beating that the Spanish would remember forever. So fast forward to 1520, and things just completely fly off the rails. Cortez leaves the city for a bit, and his second-in-command, a guy named Pedro de Alvarado, does something unbelievably reckless. He attacks and slaughters a bunch of Aztec nobles during a major religious festival. Well, that was it. That was the breaking point. The entire city just erupts in rage. Moctezuma ends up dead, and suddenly the Spanish are trapped. They're besieged inside the very city they thought they controlled.
They had only one way out, a mad dash to escape in the middle of the night. This became known as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. And it was a total disaster. As they tried to sneak out over the causeways, the Aztecs came at them from everywhere. The Spaniards, weighed down with all the gold they'd looted, were easy targets. Hundreds were killed or drowned. It was a complete and utter catastrophe for them. Yeah, just look at that number, 860. That's more than half of Cortez's entire force, wiped out in one night. They were beaten, they were humiliated, and the survivors were lucky to get away at all. For all intents and purposes, the invasion should have been over. But it wasn't, not by a long shot. And this is where the story takes a truly devastating turn. Because while Cortez and his men were licking their wounds, something else arrived in Mexico. A new enemy, an invisible one. It was far deadlier than any Spanish sword, and it would do the conquistadors' work for them. 50%. Just let that number sink in for a moment. In a matter of months, a single disease wiped out half the people living in the Valley of Mexico. It's a level of death that's almost impossible for us to even imagine today. The killer was smallpox. It arrived with the Spanish, supposedly brought by a single enslaved person. For the people of Mexico who had never been exposed to this kind of disease, they had absolutely no natural defense, no immunity.
It was like a biological firestorm, and they were defenseless against it.
And the impact went way beyond just the number of dead. It was like a domino effect that crippled the entire empire. It killed the new emperor, who had only been in power for 80 days. It killed warriors, it killed farmers, which meant nobody was around to harvest the crops, leading to widespread famine. It just completely demoralized the survivors and shattered their ability to fight back. It basically laid out the welcome mat for the Spanish to return. So while Tenochtitlan is in the grip of this horrific plague, what's Cortés doing? He's planning a comeback. And not just any comeback. He comes up with one of the wildest, most ambitious military plans you'll ever hear about. He realized that charging down those causeways again was a death trap. No, to take Tenochtitlan, he had to control the lake itself. So what's his big plan? He decides to build a fleet of warships. But here's the crazy part. He builds them in the mountains, miles away from the water. His men salvage iron and sails from the ships they'd sunk on the coast. They build these 13 boats called brigantines. And then they take them apart, piece by piece. And then thousands of their native allies literally carry the entire navy over the mountains to Lake Texcoco, where they put it all back together. It's just an absolutely mind-boggling logistical achievement.
Okay, now this is so important to understand. When you look at the forces for the final siege, you see the real story. This wasn't just a few hundred Spaniards conquering an empire. Not at all. This was a massive civil war, a huge native rebellion against the Aztecs, with the Spanish acting as the catalyst. I mean, look at those numbers. About 700 Spanish soldiers and maybe 200,000 native allies. This was the Tlaxcalans and others finally getting their revenge.
So now with this gigantic army and his brand new navy, Cortés lays siege to the city with a strategy of pure annihilation. First, they destroy the aqueduct, cutting off all fresh water. Then they blockade the causeways so no food can get in, and all the while, his ships control the lake, hammering the city from the water. It was total war. As they advanced, they tore down every single building to fill in the canals, literally erasing the city as they went. And what came next was 75 days of hell. Just a brutal, relentless, day-in, day-out grind that turned one of the most beautiful cities on earth into a pile of rubble. You can hear how ruthless it got in Cortés's own words. He basically says that because the Aztecs refused to surrender, because they fought so hard to defend their homes, he had no choice but to destroy them completely. It's a chilling justification for total destruction. No mercy.
The last stand took place in a part of the city called Tlatelolco. By this point, the defenders were starving, literally eating tree bark and dirt. They were drinking salty lake water. They were surrounded by death from sickness and battle, and yet they still refused to surrender. They fought to the very last person.
The final death toll is just staggering. It's estimated that over 100,000 Aztecs died during the siege, warriors and civilians. Even Cortés's allies lost tens of thousands of fighters, and the Spanish, they lost about 100 men. That horrifying difference in numbers tells you everything you need to know about what this siege was really like. It all came to an end on August 13th, 1521. The last Aztec emperor, a young man named Cuauhtémoc, was caught trying to escape in a canoe. Once he was captured, it was over. The fighting stopped, and just like that, the Aztec Empire ceased to exist.
So that leaves us with a big question at the end of it all. How do we file this in history? Was the fall of Tenochtitlan a brilliant military conquest, a showcase of Cortés's genius and grit? Or was it really a tragedy of an empire that was already fractured by internal hatreds and then finished off by an invisible plague it couldn't possibly fight? The truth, of course, isn't that simple. It seems to be a brutal, perfect storm of all those things combined.